brands. New Preparation H Totables. The Anywhere Preparation H. Use as directed.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Cindy Laverty Show on CRN Digital Talk Radio, and I thank you for joining me today. My guest today is Nicholas Kardaras, and his book, How Plato and Pythagoras Can Save Your Life, is fascinating. Nicholas, welcome to the show, and thanks so much for being here.
Great to be here, Cindy. Thank you.
It is my pleasure. I learned more about the Greek philosophers reading this book than I did in any philosophy class I ever took, any Greek history class I ever took. These are some pretty cool guys.
These are some pretty cool guys that I think sometimes their coolness didn't withstand the test of time, because I think what's happened is that the way philosophy professors teach philosophy and the way that what we call continental philosophy has been taught really sort of, I think, lost the essence of what the original philosophers were all about, and that's really what I try to privilege in my book. I try to reconnect with that original wisdom.
And you do that, but let's start at the beginning here, because your story is incredibly compelling. I mean, you were quite a big deal in New York back in the day.
Yeah, back in the day, I was in my own little superficial little fiefdom. I thought I was quite a big deal.
You were listed in Vanity Fair as one of New York's most fabulous people.
Yeah. George Wayne, who was a contributing editor for Vanity Fair, was one of the frequent flyers of my nightclubs back in the day, and he would always do these annual lists of 50 fabulous people, which in and of itself is sort of an absurd concept in hindsight. But when you're 23 years old, it seems kind of like a big deal. So guilty as charged.
So what happened to you? I mean, I don't want to spend the whole show talking about this, but it's really important that my listeners understand how your story evolved.
Yeah. Well, it's great that, your show is a show about caring for yourself. And I think, mine is a story where sort of a person loses their way. And,
right.
By really losing sight of what is important when we talk about caring for oneself. And, I know typically we tend to think about caring for ourselves physically or emotionally and
or selfishly.
Well, excuse me?
Or selfishly.
Or selfishly, and sometimes caring for yourself means sort of connecting to your higher purpose and your meaning in life. And I went as far away from that as possible. When I got out of college, I was, really a hardworking kid. I was a middle-class kid who went to, Cornell, a good Ivy League school. And when I got out of college, I was just, I just had a sense of emptiness in my life. I didn't know what direction to go in. And sort of by chance, I landed in the nightclub business. I had been a martial artist. I had a black belt in karate, and the Copacabana, the original Copacabana that you see in the movie Goodfellas.
And Barry Manilow sings about.
Barry Manilow sings that annoying, obnoxious song. Exactly. I heard they still play. They would play that song every night that the Copa would close down, and you would want to take your life on a nightly basis when you'd hear that song.
Well, you almost did take your life inadvertently.
Right. Well, my point is I started working at a nightclub just as a moonlighting gig, and it was exciting. And for a young drifting kid, I got caught up into the excitement of it. And that moonlighting job turned into, within 2 years, I hustled and eventually opened up my own restaurant nightclub with a couple of investors. And within 3 or 4 years, I had 3 nightclubs, and these were the velvet-roped hotspots of New York City in the mid-'80s and early '90s. A lot of celebrities, Tom Cruise, and was there at one of our second parties, and JFK Jr. and Uma Thurman. A lot of the bold-faced names, as they say, came to these clubs. And as a 24-year-old, it's very intoxicating, and literally intoxicating. And I got sucked into that life. It was very glamorous, and it was fun for a short period of time, and then eventually it became not fun because it's a very addictive and empty and superficial world.
And drugs were a big part of this.
A big part of it. Drugs, alcohol. It was, it was the prototypical sex, drugs, and rock and roll lifestyle. And eventually that, it's a deal with the devil, and eventually the devil comes collecting. And my best friend and business partner, he died of an overdose maybe 6 years into our business partnership together.
Was that a wake-up call for you, or did you just keep on going?
It's sad to say it pushes you even further into addiction because you don't know how to process that kind of loss or pain. And at that point, my life had already been spiraling out of control. I was I was living this empty existence that sort of some of my friends at one point had envied, but by the end of it, it was pretty obvious that I was out of control and had lost my sense of anything. I was lost my sense of morality, my sense of what my life was about. And eventually, my liquor licenses were revoked by Rudy Giuliani, who was mayor at the time. And, I was running my businesses like a person under the influence, not taking care of what I was supposed to be taking care of. And when I lost my liquor licenses, what I was left with was a raging drug addiction with some money and no concept of how to get myself together. And it was, in short order, I wound up, as I describe in my book, I lost everything. Not only did I lose my businesses and whatever money I had, I lost my friends, my fair weather friends, and what I thought were my real friends.
Yeah.
And I was in a very addiction is profoundly a disease of isolation and shame, and I had painted myself
and lying
into a corner.
and all of those things you have to do to cover up for it.
I couldn't even look myself in the mirror. When you would brush your teeth in the morning, I had to keep the lights turned off because I couldn't stand what I had turned into. I was so ashamed. It's a horribly shameful. Anybody who's ever experienced what I call low bottom addiction knows the shame of that and the horror of that, and you don't know how to get out of it. There were so many efforts to, okay, tomorrow I'm going to stop, and I'm going to try it this way and that way.
Yeah.
And each time, because you don't know, as a struggling addict, you don't know the way out of the darkness.
But it takes over your life. And then you ended up in a coma.
Yeah, I ended up, a close friend of mine had passed away. A lot of people started dying at that point. I was in my early 30s at that point, and people that were caught up in that lifestyle began to, many funerals were happening, and one of my other closest friends passed away, and I was incapable of handling that loss, and that really pushed me over the edge. And I don't have any memory of the actual overdose itself because I was in a coma and I was a memory loss for 2 weeks. But I was in a coma. My heart had stopped for over an hour.
Really?
Yeah, the doctors in my medical records had said that my heart was asystolic, without a heartbeat for over an hour. I was revived miraculously, to the doctor's surprise, and it was touch and go. They told my family the first night that I had barely survived, but I would probably not survive through the night. I was on life support, and miraculously I survived. But they told my mother and father that I would probably be brain dead, and that not to hold their breaths for any miracles of how.
I can't even imagine what that would be like for a parent. And you're a parent now, so can you imagine?
Yeah, I've had long talks with them since because we have a great relationship now. But I was a difficult child, and my heart goes out to them because I put them through a lot. And when I emerged, I remember waking up from that coma about 2 weeks later, and I had been transferred from the intensive care unit to the cardiac unit.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't know where I was. I didn't remember what had happened. So I opened up my eyes, and the nurse told me, "You're in the cardiac unit of Cornell Presbyterian Hospital." And I said, "For what? What am I doing here?" And she said, "No, you were dead, and you were in a coma." And initially, I didn't believe her. I was angry. When I began to realize what had happened to me, I then very selfishly I'd always been interested in the white light experience, and I was very selfishly upset that I didn't have a white light experience. Where's my white light?
I guess a coma will do that to you.
Yeah. But what had profoundly changed when I came out of that, and I had attempted periods of sobriety before.
Nick, I got to take a quick break. So
Sure.
Stay with me. We'll come right back to your story. You're listening to Cindy Laverty's show. I'll be right back.